I am the emperor of mankind. He hated me more purely than any of them. Not because I lied, but because I watched. That was the difference between Angron and the others. The rest of my sons turned from me for 1,000 reasons: ambition, pride, prophecy, madness, but not him. He turned because I left him to suffer. He never wept. He never begged. He only bled. When I found him, he was already a god, not in name, not in title, but in the way war bent around him, in the way men followed him to death, cheering, in the way he stood alone, roaring defiance at a galaxy that had never once shown him mercy. The cages of Nuceria were made to break men, to reduce them to beasts. But they only made him sharper, harder, louder. He did not fight to win. He fought to make them afraid. He was not a beast. He was a mirror, and I saw myself in it. I knew what had been done to him, the implants, the butcher's nails, that abominable atrocity hammered into his brain to force rage, to burn out thought, to drown all pain with more violence. It was not enhancement, it was mutilation, and still he endured. He had carved purpose from agony, brotherhood from the damned. He had built an army in hell. They called themselves the eaters of cities. I called them children. The slaves who fought beside him were not warriors. They were victims with fire in their eyes, torn apart, rebuilt and fused into something cruel and beautiful. And Angron stood at the center of it all, more scar than man, more wrath than logic. And he had never known kindness. So when my ship arrived above Nuceria and I saw the battle unfold, the last stand of broken champions against a world that feared its own slaves, I knew what had to be done. And I did not do it. I did not descend. I did not fight beside him. I did not let him win or die with those he called his brothers. I took him, teleported him from the field, snatched him from the jaws of his final chosen death and left the rest behind. I remember the moment he realized what had happened. Not the scream. That came later. Not the blows. That came much later. It was the silence. The long, terrible silence where he looked at me and understood. He had been torn from the only family he had ever known. He thought I had come to save them. I had only come for him. He never forgave that. Not for a moment. Not for a heartbeat. Not across all the years that followed, and I knew he was right. I told myself there was no other way, that the Imperium needed him, that I could not risk the outcome of a planetary battle, that if I had revealed myself, if I had joined his rebellion, if I had made myself a weapon of his vengeance, I would have fractured the dream. And so I let the dream cost him everything. He was not like the others. He had no room for hypocrisy, no subtlety, no masks. He loved his brothers. He loved them with a fury that made mockery of philosophy, and I tore that from him. In his eyes, I was not a savior. I was the final tyrant. When he first stood aboard my ship, the chains on his wrists were gone, but he wore them still. He stood tall, towering over my custodians, muscles trembling with unspent rage, and he said nothing. Not because he had no words, but because words were too small to carry the weight of what I had done. I did not explain myself. What could I say? That I saw his brilliance, that I admired his will, that I would give him a legion to command. He did not want command. He wanted meaning. And I had ripped his meaning from a corpse-strewn arena. The other Primarchs greeted me with awe, reverence, confusion, skepticism. Angron greeted me with silence and hatred. He did not ask who I was. He told me who I was. You are the man who watched, he said, the one who left them to die. I could have struck him then. Others would have. Mortarion, Perturabo, even Lorgar, none would have allowed such defiance. But I did not, because he was right. And in that moment I knew I had made an enemy that would never raise arms against me, but would never serve me either. He obeyed orders. He took the World Eaters and turned them into monsters that resembled him. Not in shape, but in pain. He gave them the nails, not out of malice, out of logic. If they were to understand him, they would have to suffer as he had. I could have forbidden it. I could have stopped him. But to do so would have been to confess that I had never understood him at all. And so I watched again, as he carved his legion into a mirror of his own ruin, as he screamed across 100 worlds and left them bleeding, as his name became a curse and a banner. Angron, my son. The god of wrath I refused to call broken. He was not a failure, he was a consequence, a reflection of the dream sharpened into a blade and turned inward, and I still said nothing. Because in the deepest part of me, I knew. If I admitted what he was, I would have to admit what I had become. They called them the World Eaters, but that was not what he named them. He called them his warriors, his legion, his echo. He took what I gave him and he did not change it. He reshaped it. He made them like him, not out of pride, but because he had no other way to speak. Pain was his only language. He implanted the nails in his captains, his sergeants, his chosen sons. He gave them rage. He gave them clarity through violence, and I let him. Why? Because to stop him would have been to expose what I'd already allowed. To forbid, it would have meant explaining why I had never removed the nails from him in the first place. There is no logic in reopening wounds that were never permitted to close. So I let the infection spread. Some of his sons resisted, some broke, others embraced it so thoroughly they became unrecognizable. Khan was among them. He was loyal, clever, fierce, and the nails took him too. That should have been the moment I intervened. It was not. I chose detachment, not because I could not act, but because I saw no purpose in it. There were wars to win, outcomes to preserve, a legion that did not fear, a force that knew only forward momentum. So I let the monsters run. The Great Crusade demanded blood, and Angron delivered it without question. He did not lead like Gilliman, with structure and systems. He did not uplift like Sanguinius, or charm like Fulgrim. He conquered through weight, through presence, through silence, sharpened into slaughter. Entire cities burned because he did not wish to speak. Entire worlds fell because he did not care to wait. And his sons followed. They did not chant my name. They did not raise the banners of the Imperium with pride. They raised chain blades. They screamed their father's name, not in reverence, but in resonance. I saw it long before the others did. I had not saved him. I had simply given him a new platform from which to scream. And yet, even then, I did not hate him. How could I? He never lied, never concealed what he was. He burned. And all around him, things withered in truth. The tragedy of Angron was not that he broke. It was that he never pretended to be whole. He did not believe in destiny. He did not speak of visions. He did not wear prophecy as a crown. He wore scars. He wore silence. He wore rage. And I stood apart, watching, always watching. Even then, I thought perhaps some sliver of him would be reclaimed, That purpose might soften fury, that duty might eclipse pain, but there was no duty he recognized beyond the dead. I took his brothers from him and gave him soldiers. I took his death from him and gave him orders. I replaced agony with utility and called it salvation. I saw how he moved among the other Primarchs. They flinched from him. They sneered behind their diplomacy. He was a creature of blunt force in a court of ambition. He did not play their games, and they did not want him at the table. Even those who feigned loyalty kept him at arm's length. Because Angron was not a threat of politics or betrayal, he was a reminder. A reminder that the dream we built had blood in its foundation. And I let him carry that truth alone. His legions spiraled further. No cohesion, no growth, only carnage. They fought because they knew nothing else, because he had nothing else to teach them. And I allowed it, not out of belief, but because change would require admission, and I would not concede failure while the dream still lived. Angron obeyed because it required less than disobedience. He did not follow orders so much as tolerate them. He knew he was a weapon, and I did not lie to him about that. He was used, pointed, released, and with each campaign he eroded more. His body frayed beneath the nails. His mind flickered beneath the pressure. And still, I gave him no peace. Not once did I call him back. Not once did I relieve him. Not once did I offer him the one thing he had earned 100 times over, an end, because an end would have been mercy, and I was not in the habit of offering it. The others saw a rabid beast in red armor. They saw madness. I saw burden compressed into muscle and wrath. He never begged for understanding. He never asked to be saved. He only asked not to be lied to. And I did not lie. I simply said nothing. And in silence, a monster is allowed to become myth. And myths are rarely merciful. They do not heal, they calcify. And so Angron became a myth of pain, not a martyr, not a symbol. A truth so loud no one dared to listen. When the heresy began, it was no surprise that he turned. He did not pledge allegiance to Horus. He did not scheme, plot, or justify. He simply moved. Blood was the only loyalty he had left. They call it a betrayal. As if Angron had anything left to betray. The War Master gave him what I never did, purpose without boundaries, freedom without expectation. And more than that, Horus gave him war, unshackled, pure, endless. The moment Angron saw that, there was no hesitation, because there was nothing to hesitate for. He did not fall to chaos. He was consumed by it. Warp-born gods saw in him what I had refused to acknowledge, a creature already broken, already howling, already theirs. They did not seduce him. They recognized him. Khorne did not corrupt Angron. Khorne crowned him. Demonhood was not his fall. It was his reward. A lifetime of agony and battle, rage and silence, all alchemized into divinity, wings torn from reality, armor fused with flesh, chain axes the size of monuments, and in the center, a heart that still remembered being left behind. He became what I would not face. He became what I had always feared I might be, if stripped of restraint. He was wrath without context, hate without politics, war without an end, and I allowed it. The man I once found in chains now walked as a god of the battlefield. His voice shattered worlds. His presence broke the minds of mortals. He was everything I told myself the Imperium could never be. And yet, he was forged in its image by my hand. Even the demon is not free of the origin. Beneath the horns, beneath the fire, beneath the warp-forged sinew and blade, There remains a scarred gladiator, reaching back through time for something I never gave him. Not forgiveness, understanding, and I cannot offer it. Not because I lack the will, but because I gave up the right long ago. The others curse me in whispers. Angron never whispered. He roared. Even now, as his monstrous form rampages across the stars, I can feel the shape of his voice. It is not chaos that drives it. It is the echo of a son who was never heard. There will come a time when we meet again, not across words, not across history, but in fire. And when that time comes, I will not speak, because I will have nothing left to say. There is no redemption to offer him. There is no healing to grant. There is only what remains between us, silence, sharpened into judgment. Angron was not my mistake. He was my consequence, and I will carry him longer than any throne will carry me. He did not fail. I did, but I will never say it aloud, because gods do not confess, and I am the Emperor of mankind.